An old German shepherd approached an abandoned baby in the scorching desert heat, and did the unthinkable. He didn't bark. He didn't leave. He lay beside the child, shielding him with his body, licking his face to keep him conscious, refusing to move, even as the sun threatened to take them both. But this was no random rescue. This baby wasn't just lost, he was left behind on purpose. And the dog? He wasn't just protecting a child, he was guarding a secret that could bring down one of the wealthiest families in the state. Now, a retired army vet must make an impossible choice: walk away and stay safe, or risk everything to protect the baby and expose the truth someone killed to hide. Why did the dog lead her there? And what happens when the ones who left the baby come back to finish what they started? Your comments and presence here remind me why I tell these stories. If you still believe in the healing strength of love, truth, and quiet courage, then you're the reason this channel exists. The morning sun painted the Nevada desert in shades of gold as Dr. Rebecca Hartwell stepped onto her weathered front porch, coffee mug in hand. The familiar creak of wooden boards beneath her feet matched the steady rhythm of her morning routine. At 45 years old, she had found peace in this remote ranch, away from the chaos of her former life as an army veterinarian. "Kaiser!" she called out, expecting to hear the familiar click of nails on hardwood as her aging German shepherd made his way to greet her. But this morning, silence answered instead. Rebecca set her coffee down, a small frown creasing her forehead. Kaiser was always there for their morning ritual, watching the sunrise together before starting their day of ranch work and veterinary house calls. "Kaiser!" Her voice carried across the empty yard. The morning heat was already building, promising another scorching summer day. She walked around the corner of the house, checking Kaiser's favorite sleeping spots. The old dog wasn't under the porch or near the water trough where he liked to cool off. A knot of worry began to form in her stomach. In all their years together, Kaiser had never wandered off without a reason. His advancing age made him even more of a homebody, preferring to stay close to the ranch house where the air conditioning kept him comfortable. Rebecca's military training kicked in as she systematically searched the immediate area. Near the fence line, she found what she was looking for: Kaiser's distinctive paw prints in the dusty earth heading straight out into the desert. "What got into you, old boy?" she muttered, hurrying back to the house. Within minutes, she had filled a backpack with water bottles, a basic first aid kit, and her satellite phone. The desert was already warming up fast, and an aging dog wouldn't last long in the brutal heat. Following Kaiser's tracks, Rebecca moved with purpose across the harsh terrain. The morning sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly as she navigated around thorny brush and jagged rocks. Sweat trickled down her back, and she took regular sips from her water bottle, all while keeping her eyes fixed on the trail. "Come on, Kaiser, where are you?" she whispered, pausing to shield her eyes as she scanned the horizon. The tracks led her deeper into the wilderness, far beyond where any casual wanderer would venture. Something must have drawn him out here. Something important enough to break 13 years of established routine. After an hour of tracking, Rebecca heard it, a faint whining carried on the hot breeze. Her heart leaped as she quickened her pace, following the sound over a small rise. What she saw next stopped her dead in her tracks. There was Kaiser, his massive form moving in a tight circle around something small and pale in the sand. The old dog's tongue was hanging out as he panted heavily in the heat, but he maintained his protective patrol, occasionally stopping to gently lick at whatever he was guarding. "Kaiser!" Rebecca called out, jogging toward him. The German shepherd's head snapped up, and he barked once, an urgent sound she'd never heard from him before. As she drew closer, the air left her lungs in a shocked gasp. There, wrapped in a thin blanket and barely moving, was an infant. The baby's dark hair was damp with sweat, tiny face flushed red from the heat. Kaiser had positioned himself to cast his shadow over the child, using his own body to shield the baby from the deadly sun. "Oh my God!" Rebecca breathed, dropping to her knees beside them. Her trained hands quickly assessed the situation. The baby was alive but severely dehydrated, skin hot to the touch. Kaiser whined anxiously, continuing to lick the infant's face, instinctively trying to keep the child conscious and cool. With gentle movements, Rebecca lifted the baby, cradling the tiny form close to her chest. The infant's eyes fluttered, bright, unfocused eyes that seemed too wise for such a small face. Kaiser pressed against her leg, his amber eyes fixed on the child with fierce protectiveness. "You found him," Rebecca said softly, scratching Kaiser's graying muzzle with her free hand. "You saved this baby's life, old boy." The German shepherd's tail wagged once, acknowledging her praise while maintaining his vigilant watch over his small charge. Rebecca quickly pulled out a water bottle and, with the experience of countless medical emergencies, began to carefully moisten the baby's parched lips. The infant responded weakly, and she felt a surge of hope. But questions raced through her mind. Who would leave a baby out here? How long had the child been alone before Kaiser found him? The morning had started like any other, but now she held a precious life in her arms, a life saved by the extraordinary instincts of her loyal companion. Kaiser stood at attention beside them, his aging body still radiating the strength and purpose that had driven him to his remarkable rescue. As she gathered the baby close and prepared for the urgent journey back to the ranch, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that their quiet life had just changed forever. Kaiser fell into step beside her, his protective instinct unwavering as they began their careful trek through the desert heat, now guardians of an innocent life that fate had placed in their path. Rebecca's medical training took over as she knelt in the scorching sand, her mind shifting into the focused clarity she'd developed during her years of military service. The baby's skin was hot and dry to the touch, a dangerous sign of severe dehydration. His breathing was shallow, and his tiny lips were cracked from exposure to the brutal desert heat. "Hang in there, little one," she murmured, quickly pulling supplies from her backpack. Kaiser remained vigilant, his grey muzzle hovering near the infant's face as Rebecca worked. With practiced movements, she created a makeshift examination area using her light jacket as a clean surface. The baby stirred weakly as she checked his vital signs. Pulse rapid but present, skin tenting when pinched, fontanelle noticeably sunken. All classic signs of dangerous dehydration. "Good boy, Kaiser. Keep watching," she instructed, and the old German shepherd responded with a soft whine, maintaining his protective stance while she reached for her satellite phone. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keypad as she dialed emergency services. "This is Dr. Rebecca Hartwell. I need immediate medical assistance for an infant with severe dehydration and heat exposure." She rattled off her GPS coordinates and the baby's condition with military precision, her free hand still working to assess the child. While waiting for confirmation, she noticed something flutter from the thin blanket wrapped around the baby. A piece of paper, partially stuck to the fabric with dried sweat. Rebecca carefully extracted it, her heart thumping harder as she read the words scrawled in hasty handwriting. "He doesn't deserve the Brennan name." The dispatcher's voice drew her attention back to the phone. "Air ambulance is 15 minutes out, Dr. Hartwell. Continue emergency care procedures." "Understood," she replied, tucking the note into her pocket. Questions could wait. Right now, this baby needed immediate intervention. Rebecca pulled out a small bottle of pediatric electrolyte solution she kept in her vet kit. It wasn't ideal, but it was sterile and would help. With delicate care, she began administering small drops onto the infant's lips and tongue. "Come on, sweetheart, just a little bit." The baby's survival instinct kicked in, and he started to respond, his tiny tongue working to capture the life-giving moisture. Kaiser's tail wagged once at this sign of improvement, but he didn't break his protective circle around them. The sun continued its merciless assault as Rebecca worked to create better shelter. She fashioned a sunshade using her backpack and jacket, positioning it to cast maximum shadow over the baby. Every few minutes, she administered more drops of fluid, watching with growing relief as the infant became slightly more responsive. "That's it, little fighter," she encouraged softly, stroking his dark hair. "Help is coming." The baby's bright eyes opened briefly, seeming to focus on her face for a moment before closing again. Something fierce and protective stirred in Rebecca's chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced since her combat medicine days. Kaiser's ears suddenly pricked forward, and seconds later, Rebecca heard it too, the distinctive thrum of helicopter blades approaching. The old dog barked once, but didn't leave his post, even as the air ambulance appeared over the horizon. The medical team worked quickly, taking over care of the infant, while Rebecca briefed them on his condition and the treatment she'd administered. As they prepared the baby for transport, she found herself reluctant to let him go. "I'm following you to the hospital," she told the paramedics firmly. It wasn't a request. They nodded, understanding in their eyes. "We're heading to Desert Valley Medical Center. It's the closest facility with a pediatric unit." Rebecca knelt beside Kaiser, wrapping her arms around his sturdy neck. "You did amazing, old boy. You're the reason this baby is alive." The German Shepherd's amber eyes remained fixed on the infant as the medical team carried him to the helicopter. "His name," Rebecca said suddenly, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her. "For now, let's call him Thomas." She couldn't explain why she chose it. The name simply felt right for this tiny survivor. As the helicopter lifted off, Rebecca and Kaiser made their way back across the desert to her truck, parked at the ranch. The note in her pocket seemed to burn with unspoken questions. Brennan. She knew that name. The Brennans were one of the wealthiest families in Nevada. What was their connection to this abandoned infant? Kaiser jumped into the truck's cab without hesitation, breaking his usual routine of riding in the back. His intent was clear. He wasn't letting Thomas out of his sight. Rebecca scratched his ears as she started the engine. "Don't worry, old boy. We're not letting him out of our sight either." The truck roared to life, and Rebecca pointed it toward Desert Valley Medical Center, her mind already racing with questions about the mysterious note and the baby's identity. But one thing was certain. Somehow, in the space of a few hours, both she and Kaiser had become fiercely protective of the small life they'd found in the desert. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The fluorescent lights of Desert Valley Medical Center cast a harsh glow as Rebecca paced the pediatric ward's waiting room. Kaiser lay at attention by her feet, his eyes fixed on the double doors where they had taken Thomas. Despite hospital regulations about animals, one look at the protective German Shepherd service dog Vest, a remnant from his time with his previous owner, had convinced the staff to let him stay. After what felt like hours, Dr. Sarah Chen emerged with a tired smile. "Doctor Hartwell, Thomas is responding beautifully to treatment. The fluids and care you provided in the field made all the difference." Rebecca's shoulders sagged with relief. "He's going to be okay?" "Yes, thanks to Kaiser finding him when he did. And your quick response, we expect a full recovery. If he'd been out there even an hour longer." Dr. Chen let the sentence trail off, then continued more brightly. "We estimate he's about 3 months old, and aside from the dehydration and exposure, he appears to be a healthy baby boy." "Has anyone reported a missing infant?" Rebecca asked, though she already suspected the answer. Dr. Chen shook her head. "Local police have checked. No missing baby reports matching his description. Child Services has been notified, but given the note you found..." She hesitated. "This is looking less like a lost child and more like an intentional abandonment. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Or worse. A social worker named Marcus Torres joined them, his expression grave. Dr. Hartwell, we're treating this as a potential criminal case. That baby was left to die in the desert. Until we can locate his family or determine his identity, he'll need emergency placement in the system. Rebecca straightened, feeling Kaiser press against her leg. I'll take him. Both Dr. Chen and Torres looked surprised. Marcus cleared his throat. You have experience with foster care? I have a clean record, a secure income, and a safe home. I've passed every background check the military ever threw at me during my service, Rebecca said firmly. More importantly, I have a connection to this case. Kaiser found him for a reason. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll need to conduct a home study, but given the circumstances and your qualifications, I can start the emergency certification process for temporary guardianship. Can I see him? Rebecca asked. Dr. Chen led them to the pediatric unit where Thomas lay in a clear hospital bassinet, now peacefully sleeping with healthy color in his cheeks. Kaiser's tail wagged at the sight of him, and the dog let out a soft whine of recognition. Rebecca reached down to stroke Thomas's tiny hand. Hey there, little fighter, she whispered. His fingers instinctively curled around her thumb, and that protective feeling in her chest grew stronger. Later that evening, after completing initial paperwork with Marcus, Rebecca sat in the hospital's cafeteria with her laptop. Kaiser remained by her side, accepting occasional bites of turkey sandwich as she dug into her research. The Brennan name opened up a wealth of information. The family owned one of Nevada's largest cattle operations, with land holdings stretching across 3 counties. Recent news articles detailed the unexpected death of William Brennan Sr. 6 months ago, an apparent heart attack, though some local gossip columns hinted at irregularities in the autopsy report. Rebecca's military training had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about the timing felt off. She opened another tab and began reaching out to old contacts. Former intelligence officers who owed her favors from her service days, local ranch hands who might have connections to the Brennan operation. A message from her friend Jake Martinez, now working in the county records office, caught her attention. Estate disputes getting ugly. Senior's will changed 2 weeks before death. Younger son William Jr. cut out completely. Whole inheritance going to Mother Constance and older son Robert. But rumor says Jr. secretly married 6 months ago. If true plus legitimate heir exists, throws whole inheritance into question. Rebecca's heart rate quickened as she looked at Thomas's birth timing. The pieces were starting to fit together. A secret marriage, a baby who could threaten a multi-million-dollar inheritance, a convenient death, and an infant abandoned in the desert with a note denouncing his claim to the Brennan name. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Home study scheduled for tomorrow. Given circumstances, expediting temporary guardianship process. Rebecca looked through the window of the pediatric unit where Thomas slept peacefully, Kaiser's watchful gaze never leaving the baby. She didn't know exactly what she'd stumbled into, but she knew with absolute certainty that she would protect this child with everything she had. A nurse appeared at the nursery window, gesturing that she could come back in. Rebecca packed up her laptop and stood, Kaiser immediately at attention beside her. Whatever connection the baby had to the Brennan family, someone had tried to silence him permanently. But they hadn't counted on a retired army veterinarian and a loyal German shepherd standing in their way. As she walked back to Thomas's room, Rebecca began mentally listing the security upgrades she'd need to make to her ranch. She had a feeling they were going to need them. The morning sun streamed through the hospital room window as Rebecca cradled Thomas, giving him his morning bottle. Kaiser lay at their feet, his tail gently thumping against the floor whenever the baby made a happy gurgling sound. 3 days had passed since they'd found him in the desert, and already Rebecca felt a deep connection forming with this tiny, resilient child. "You're quite the fighter, aren't you?" she murmured, watching as Thomas's tiny fingers wrapped around her pinky. His bright eyes seemed to study her face with an intensity that belied his young age. Her laptop sat open on the bedside table, displaying yet another article about the Brennan family empire. The more she dug, the more unsettling the picture became. The Brennans weren't just wealthy ranchers. They were kingmakers in Nevada politics, with connections reaching all the way to the governor's office. A soft knock at the door preceded the entrance of her old military friend, Jack Cooper, now working as a private investigator. "Beck, you need to see this," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. Rebecca carefully shifted Thomas to her shoulder, patting his back as Jack spread several documents across the rolling hospital table. Kaiser raised his head, watching intently. "William Brennan Sr.'s death wasn't as straightforward as they made it seem," Jack explained, pointing to a copied autopsy report. "The county medical examiner signed off on natural causes, but I spoke to the night shift morgue assistant. There were irregularities they were told to ignore, traces of a substance that could have triggered his heart attack." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. "Murder. Nothing provable," Jack said, shaking his head. "The Brennans' influence runs deep. I found 5 different cases in the past decade where people who opposed their business interests suddenly dropped their complaints after mysterious accidents or family emergencies." Thomas made a small sound, and Rebecca automatically rocked him, her military training kicking in as she processed the information. "Tell me about Constance Brennan." Jack pulled up another document. "The matriarch. She's the real power behind the throne. Started as a banker's daughter, married William Sr. when they were both young. Together they turned a modest ranch into an empire, but sources say she was always the strategist. She's known for being..." He paused, searching for the right word. "Ruthlessly efficient at eliminating threats." Rebecca looked down at Thomas, who had drifted off to sleep against her shoulder. His peaceful face contrasted sharply with the dark implications of what she was learning. "And the sons?" "Robert Brennan, the eldest, runs their legal operations. William Jr. was the wild card. Environmental activism, workers' rights campaigns, everything his family opposed. He disappeared from public view about 8 months ago." The timing made Rebecca's heart race. 8 months ago, right around when Thomas would have been conceived. She carefully laid the sleeping baby in his hospital bassinet, Kaiser immediately moving closer to stand guard. "Jack, I need you to look into marriage records, but expand the search beyond Nevada. And any connection to someone named Santos, that's the name on Kaiser's old service dog registration." Jack's eyebrows rose. "You think the dog belonged to Thomas's mother?" Rebecca finished quietly. "Kaiser's protective instincts toward him are too strong for it to be coincidence." Throughout the day, Rebecca alternated between caring for Thomas and piecing together the puzzle of his heritage. The baby seemed to flourish under her care, responding to her voice with bright smiles and reaching for Kaiser whenever the shepherd came near. By evening, her secured laptop pinged with an encrypted message from another military contact. The information made her sit up straight in her chair. William Brennan Jr. had indeed married, in a small ceremony in Arizona 8 months ago. His bride was Maria Santos, an environmental lawyer who had been building a case against the Brennan family's water rights violations. Both had vanished shortly after William Sr.'s death. Rebecca looked at Kaiser, who met her gaze with knowing eyes. "You belonged to Maria Santos, didn't you, boy?" she whispered. The shepherd's ears perked up at the name, and he whined softly. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that made her blood run cold. A secret marriage? A pregnancy that threatened the family inheritance? A convenient death? A mother who had vanished? And a baby, abandoned in the desert with a note denying his birthright. Thomas stirred in his sleep, and Rebecca reached down to gentle him. Kaiser pressed against her leg, his protective stance unwavering. The scope of what they were up against was becoming clear: a powerful family with virtually unlimited resources and a demonstrated willingness to eliminate problems permanently. But as she watched Thomas's peaceful sleep and felt Kaiser's steady presence, Rebecca's resolve only strengthened. Her military career had taught her how to face overwhelming odds. More importantly, it had taught her that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. She might be just one person standing against an empire, but she had survived war zones and battlefield hospitals. She had training, resources, and most importantly, an unwavering moral compass. The Brennans might have wealth and political connections, but Rebecca had something they didn't: the truth. And she would protect both it and Thomas with everything she had. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after noon, a convoy of black SUVs snaking their way up Rebecca's ranch driveway. She stood on her front porch, Thomas cradled protectively in her arms and Kaiser at attention by her side. The vehicles pulled up in a precise formation, and Rebecca counted at least 15 people emerging, men in expensive suits and others with the unmistakable bearing of private security. From the lead vehicle stepped a woman whose very presence seemed to drop the temperature several degrees. Constance Brennan moved with calculated precision, her steel-gray hair pulled back severely, her designer outfit pristine despite the desert dust. Her cold eyes fixed first on Thomas, then moved dismissively over Rebecca. "Dr. Hartwell," Constance said, her voice as sharp as a blade. "I see you've been caring for my grandson. We're here to take him home." Rebecca's arms tightened instinctively around Thomas. "I wasn't aware anyone was looking for him, Mrs. Brennan. Strange, since he was abandoned in the desert to die." Constance's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "A misunderstanding. The child is illegitimate, the result of an unfortunate liaison. We've been searching for him since a confused servant mistakenly left him." "Left him?" Rebecca's voice hardened. "In 100-degree heat without water? That's not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Brennan. That's attempted murder." One of the suits stepped forward, opening a briefcase. "Dr. Hartwell, we have papers here authorizing the immediate transfer of custody. Additionally," he pulled out a thick envelope, "Mrs. Brennan would like to compensate you generously for your care and discretion." Rebecca glanced at the envelope, which looked stuffed with cash. "I'm not interested in your money." $20,000 is more than fair," Constance cut in, "along with our gratitude and ongoing goodwill, which could be quite valuable to a small-town veterinarian." The threat in those words was clear. Kaiser moved forward, his hackles rising as he positioned himself between Rebecca and the visitors. The reaction was immediate. Several of the security personnel flinched backward, and Constance's composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked remarkably like fear. "That dog," one of the security men muttered, reaching inside his jacket. "I wouldn't," Rebecca said calmly. "Kaiser is a trained military animal. He can smell a weapon, and he doesn't take kindly to threats." The man slowly moved his hand away from his jacket, but the tension in the air remained thick. Rebecca noticed how the entire group kept their distance from Kaiser, their eyes tracking his every move with barely concealed panic. "The dog is irrelevant," Constance snapped, but her voice wavered slightly. "What matters is that boy belongs with his family, his proper family." "His proper family?" Rebecca challenged. "Like his father, William Jr., or his mother, Maria Santos?" The name dropped like a bomb into the conversation. Constance's face went white, then red with fury. "You have no right to speak of things you don't understand." "I understand plenty," Rebecca replied. I understand that William and Maria were legally married. I understand that Thomas is their legitimate son and heir, and I understand that some people might see that as a threat to their control of the Brennan fortune. You're playing a very dangerous game, Doctor. Hartwell, Constance hissed. Do you really think you can stand against us? We can destroy your practice with one phone call. Foreclose on this ranch before sunset. Make sure you never work in veterinary medicine again. Thomas began to fuss, and Kaiser immediately turned to check on him, his protective instinct evident. Rebecca watched as several of the visitors took another step back, their fear of the dog becoming more obvious by the second. You seem awfully afraid of Kaiser, Rebecca observed quietly. Almost like you've met him before. When he belonged to Maria Santos, perhaps. The color drained from Constance's face. This discussion is over. You'll be hearing from our attorneys and Dr. Hartwell. Her voice dropped to a menacing whisper. Accidents happen all the time on remote ranches, especially to people who don't know their place. Rebecca stood her ground. I survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, Mrs. Brennan. Your threats don't frighten me, and as long as I'm breathing, you're not laying a hand on this child. Constance's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned sharply, her designer heels crunching on the gravel. This isn't over, she called over her shoulder as she strode back to her vehicle. The convoy departed in another cloud of dust, leaving Rebecca standing on her porch with Thomas and Kaiser. The baby had settled again, one tiny hand curled into Kaiser's fur. The shepherd kept his alert posture until the last vehicle disappeared from view. Rebecca looked down at Thomas's innocent face, then at Kaiser's protective stance. The Brennans' extreme reaction to the dog had confirmed her suspicions. Kaiser was a living link to whatever had happened to Maria Santos, and his presence terrified them, which meant she was on the right track, however dangerous that track might be. Rebecca sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open and a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. Thomas slept peacefully in his portable crib nearby, while Kaiser maintained his constant vigil. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she dug deeper into Maria Santos's background, driven by the Brennans' suspicious reaction to her dog. A message notification popped up on her screen. It was from one of her military contacts. They'd found someone who might have answers. Carlos Santos, a former Border Patrol agent who had been searching for his missing sister Maria for months. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed the number. Mr. Santos, this is Dr. Rebecca Hartwell. I believe we need to talk about your sister. There was a long pause on the other end. What do you know about Maria? His voice was rough with emotion. I think I'm caring for her son, Rebecca said softly, and I think your sister's dog is currently protecting him. Kaiser. Carlos's voice cracked. You have Kaiser? Maria would never leave him behind unless... He couldn't finish the sentence. Can you meet me? Today? Rebecca asked. There's a diner in town, neutral ground. 2 hours later, Rebecca sat across from Carlos Santos in a quiet booth at the back of Pat's diner. He was a weathered man in his early 40s, with the same dark eyes she'd begun to notice in Thomas. His gaze kept drifting to the baby carrier beside her, where Thomas slept peacefully. He looks just like her, Carlos whispered, his hands clenched around his coffee cup. Maria would have been such a wonderful mother. Tell me about her, Rebecca urged gently. She worked for the Brennans? Carlos nodded, his expression darkening. As a housekeeper, officially. But there was more to it. She and William Jr., they fell in love. Real love, not what his family claimed later. They tried to paint her as someone after the family money. Maria didn't care about money. She was the most honest person I knew. Carlos pulled out his phone, showing Rebecca a photo of a beautiful young woman with Thomas's dark eyes and gentle smile. She was working on her nursing degree, taking night classes. That's how she met William. He was hurt in a riding accident, and she helped care for him during her clinical rotation. Rebecca leaned forward. What happened to her, Carlos? His eyes filled with tears. She disappeared right after William's death. The official story was that she'd quit and gone back to Mexico, but Maria would never leave Kaiser. That dog was her protection, her constant companion. He looked at Rebecca intently. How did you end up with him? Rebecca explained finding Thomas in the desert, how Kaiser had saved the baby's life. With each detail, Carlos's face grew darker with rage and grief. Those monsters, he whispered. They tried to kill her baby, just like they killed her and William. You think William was murdered too? Carlos pulled out a worn envelope. Maria sent me this just before she disappeared. She was scared, said she needed to document everything. He slid several papers across the table. Their marriage certificate. William changed his will, making Maria his heir. And this, he handed over a final document. DNA test results, proving she was pregnant with William's child. Rebecca's hands shook as she read through the papers. They were legally married. Thomas isn't illegitimate at all. He's the rightful heir to everything. William's death wasn't an accident, Carlos said grimly. He fell from a horse, but Maria suspected foul play. She told me the family was furious about their marriage, about the baby. Constance Brennan had already lost control of one son to marriage. William's older brother ran off years ago. She wasn't about to let the fortune go to Maria's child. Rebecca thought about the fear she'd seen in Constance's eyes when Kaiser approached. The dog knows something, doesn't he? He was there when... Carlos nodded slowly. Kaiser was with Maria everywhere. If something happened to her, he witnessed it. That's why they're terrified of him. He's a living witness to whatever they did. And now he's protecting her son. Rebecca said softly, looking at Thomas, making sure they can't finish what they started in the desert. Maria deserves so much better. Carlos's voice broke. She was so excited about the baby, about building a life with William. She had all these plans. He reached out tentatively, touching Thomas's tiny hand. I never thought I'd get to meet my nephew. Rebecca watched as Thomas's fingers curled around his uncle's thumb. We need to protect him, Carlos. The Brennans won't stop coming after him. He threatens everything they've built. We have evidence now, Carlos said, gathering the documents. My contacts in law enforcement, your military connections. Together we might be able to expose the truth, but it won't be easy. The Brennans have already proven they're willing to kill to keep their secrets. Rebecca thought about Constance's threats, about the terror in her eyes when confronted with Kaiser. They're scared, she said firmly, scared of the truth coming out. And now they know we have proof. Thomas is the legitimate heir to the Brennan fortune, and we can prove it. Kaiser lifted his head from his position near Thomas, his ears alert. The dog's unwavering dedication to protecting Maria's son filled Rebecca with determination. They would find justice for Maria Santos and make sure her son claimed his rightful inheritance, no matter what it took. Rebecca paced her living room, the morning sun casting long shadows through the windows. Her satellite phone lay on the coffee table, and she kept glancing at it while Carlos gently rocked Thomas in the old wooden rocking chair. Kaiser watched them both from his position by the door, ever vigilant. Are you sure about this contact of yours? Carlos asked, his voice soft to avoid waking the baby. Rebecca nodded. Patricia Reed was my commanding officer in Afghanistan. She's now one of the most respected investigative journalists in the Southwest. If anyone can help us expose the truth, it's her. As if on cue, the phone buzzed. Rebecca snatched it up, putting it on speaker. Patricia? I'm about 20 minutes out, Becca. A crisp voice replied. Just past the town limits. You weren't kidding about this place being remote. We'll have coffee waiting. Rebecca promised, already moving to the kitchen. Patricia Reed arrived exactly 18 minutes later, driving a dusty Jeep that had clearly seen its share of rough terrain. She was a tall woman with short grey hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Kaiser approached her cautiously, but after a quick sniff, his tail started wagging. "Smart dog," Patricia commented, scratching behind his ears. "He remembers me from when I visited you last year." Her expression turned serious as she spotted Carlos and Thomas. "That's him? Maria Santos's son?" Carlos nodded, protective arms cradling his nephew. "Yes, this is Thomas." Patricia set her laptop bag on the kitchen table and pulled out a thick folder. "I've been doing some preliminary digging since you called, Becca. The Brennans have left quite a paper trail, despite their best efforts to cover it up." She spread out documents across the table. Bank statements, property records, and what looked like surveillance photos. William Brennan Jr. started moving assets around 6 months ago, just before his marriage to Maria. He was clearly preparing to protect his wife and child from his family's interference. "How did you get access to these?" Carlos asked, impressed. Patricia's smile was grim. "Let's just say I still have friends in interesting places. The Brennans may have political connections, but they're not the only ones with resources." Rebecca studied a photograph showing William and Maria together at what appeared to be a small chapel. "Is this their wedding?" "Yes," Carlos confirmed, leaning closer. "I wasn't there. Maria said it had to be completely secret, but she sent me this same photo afterward." His voice caught. She was so happy that day. Patricia typed rapidly on her laptop. "The marriage certificate is legitimate. I had it verified by 3 separate sources. William also filed amended estate documents with his private attorney, documents that mysteriously vanished after his death." "But we have copies," Rebecca said, holding up the papers Carlos had brought. "Better than that," Patricia replied. "I found the attorney who handled the changes. He's willing to talk. He's been feeling guilty ever since William's suspicious accident." A sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. Kaiser's ears perked up, but he didn't growl. A good sign. Rebecca checked the security camera she'd installed after the Brennans' first visit and relaxed slightly. "It's just the mail carrier." But when she opened the door, instead of their usual carrier, there was a stern-looking woman in a business suit. "Dr. Rebecca Hartwell. I'm from the Nevada State Veterinary Board. We've received some concerning complaints about your practice." Rebecca's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "I see. And these complaints wouldn't happen to have come from the Brennan family, would they?" The woman's slight flinch told Rebecca everything she needed to know. Behind her, she heard Patricia approaching. "Dr. Hartwell won't be answering any questions without her legal representative present. I suggest you leave any documentation with me." The inspector looked startled by Patricia's authoritative tone. After handing over a thick envelope, she retreated quickly to her car. "They're escalating," Patricia said grimly, scanning the documents. "These complaints are ridiculous, but they'll force you to spend time and money defending yourself." "They're trying to pressure me into giving up Thomas," Rebecca said, watching as Carlos continued rocking the sleeping baby. "They must be getting desperate." Patricia's eyes gleamed with determination. "Good. Desperate people make mistakes. I've already got 2 sources inside the Brennan organization willing to talk. One of them was there the night William died. Says it definitely wasn't an accident." "What about Maria?" Carlos asked quietly. "Do they know what happened to my sister?" Patricia's expression softened. "We're getting closer, Carlos. The same night William died, there were several calls made from the main house to a private security firm known for handling the family's special problems. We're tracking down those security contractors now." Rebecca felt a chill despite the warm day. "They're going to keep coming after us, aren't they?" "Yes," Patricia said bluntly. But we're going to be ready. I'm publishing the first article tomorrow, just establishing the basic facts about William's marriage and his son's existence. Nothing they can easily deny. Won't that put us all in more danger? Carlos asked. It'll actually help protect us, Patricia explained. Once the story is public, anything that happens to us will look suspicious. I'm also arranging for all our evidence to be held in secure locations. If anything happens to any of us, everything gets released immediately. Rebecca watched as Thomas stirred in his sleep, his tiny hand clutching Carlos's shirt. How long until we can prove everything? A few days, maybe a week, Patricia replied, organizing her documents. The key is getting those security contractors to talk. Once they do, we can prove not just Thomas's legitimacy, but also his parents' murders. And then? Carlos asked. Then, Patricia said with grim satisfaction, the Brennan empire comes crashing down, and your nephew gets everything his parents wanted for him. Kaiser padded over to Thomas, gently touching his nose to the baby's hand. The simple gesture reminded them all of what they were fighting for. Not just justice, but the future of an innocent child who had already lost so much. Rebecca straightened her shoulders, feeling stronger with her allies beside her. They had the truth on their side, and soon the whole world would know it. Rebecca jolted awake at 3 o'clock in the morning as her phone rang, its harsh tone cutting through the darkness. Kaiser's low growl from his position near Thomas's crib told her this wasn't a friendly call. Doctor Hartwell. A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. Give up the boy, or things will get very unpleasant. She ended the call, her hands shaking slightly as she documented the time and details in the notebook Patricia had given her. It was the third threatening call this week. Morning brought worse news. A stern-faced social worker arrived with 2 sheriff's deputies and a court order. I'm sorry, Dr. Hartwell, but we're here to take temporary custody of the infant pending investigation of allegations regarding your fitness as a guardian. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest as she read the document. The Brennans had somehow convinced a judge that she was unstable and potentially dangerous. Kaiser whined anxiously as she packed Thomas's things with trembling hands. I'll fight this, she promised Thomas, kissing his forehead before placing him in the social worker's arms. I'll get you back. Kaiser tried to follow them out, barking frantically until Rebecca called him back. She watched through tears as they drove away with Thomas, feeling as though part of her heart had been torn out. Her phone buzzed. Patricia. I heard what happened, her friend said without preamble. The Brennans got to Judge Matthews. He owes them for some real estate deals that saved his family ranch last year. Can we fight it? Already on it. Carlos is meeting with a family court specialist this afternoon, but Rebecca... Patricia hesitated. Be careful. My sources say Constance Brennan hired some ex-military contractors, the kind who don't ask questions. As if to confirm Patricia's warning, Rebecca discovered her front gate smashed open that evening. Kaiser's agitated barking led her to find spray-painted threats across her barn door. Leave town or die. She called the sheriff's office, but knew it was useless. The deputy who arrived took photos and shrugged apologetically. Not much we can do without witnesses, ma'am. That night, rocks crashed through her windows. Kaiser charged out through the doggy door, his fierce barking followed by the sound of running footsteps and a vehicle speeding away. Rebecca didn't sleep. Instead, she sat in her living room with the lights off, her old service pistol in her lap. She thought about Thomas, alone in foster care, probably crying for her and Kaiser. The thought strengthened her resolve. At dawn, she called Carlos. I need your help securing the ranch. He arrived 2 hours later with supplies, motion sensors, security cameras, reinforced locks. Patricia's article goes live tomorrow, he said as they worked. Once the public knows about William and Maria's marriage, the Brennans will have a harder time operating in the shadows. If we survive that long, Rebecca muttered, watching Kaiser patrol the property perimeter with fierce determination. That afternoon, 3 black SUVs pulled up to her gate. Men in tactical gear emerged, making no attempt to hide their weapons. Kaiser's hackles rose as Rebecca grabbed her phone, already dialing the sheriff. "This is private property," she called out, filming with her phone. "Leave now." "Just delivering a message," their leader said with a cold smile. "Accidents happen out here in the desert. Lots of dangerous wildlife. Sometimes people and their pets just disappear." They left without further threats, but their message was clear. Rebecca spent the rest of the day reinforcing her defenses, grateful for her military training. That night, she heard engines approaching. Kaiser's warning bark sent her running to the security monitors Carlos had installed. The footage showed men in black clothing cutting through her fence. Rebecca's hands were steady as she called 911, then Patricia and Carlos. "They're here," she said simply before moving to her defensive position. Kaiser took up his post near the back door, his powerful body tense and ready. Rebecca heard glass breaking, then heavy footsteps. A canister rolled across her floor, spewing smoke. But Rebecca was prepared. The industrial fan Carlos had installed quickly cleared the smoke, and her military-grade gas mask protected her. She heard cursing as her attackers realized their plan had failed. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. The intruders retreated quickly, leaving behind equipment that would later prove very useful to Patricia's investigation. "You okay?" Carlos asked when he arrived with the sheriff's deputies. His expression was grim as he surveyed the damage. "We're fine," Rebecca assured him, watching Kaiser check every room before returning to her side. "But we need to get Thomas back. Soon. Patricia's story breaks in 6 hours." Carlos reminded her. "And we've got something else. One of the security contractors who was there the night Maria died. He's willing to testify." Rebecca nodded, her determination hardening. Every attack, every threat only proved how desperate the Brennans were becoming, which meant she and her allies must be getting close to the truth. She knelt beside Kaiser, drawing strength from his unwavering loyalty. "We're going to win this," she promised him. "We're going to bring Thomas home and make sure the people who hurt his parents pay for what they've done." Kaiser's answering bark echoed through the damaged house. Not a sound of fear, but of defiance. Like his human companion, he had no intention of backing down. Rebecca began cleaning up the broken glass, her mind already planning their next moves. The Brennans had shown their hand. They were willing to use violence to keep their secrets. But they had underestimated the strength of the alliance formed to protect one innocent child. As dawn approached, Rebecca watched the sunrise through her shattered windows, Kaiser vigilant beside her. Somewhere out there, Thomas was waiting for them. And no amount of threats or violence would stop her from bringing him home. The night wrapped Rebecca's ranch in darkness, broken only by the pale glow of a quarter moon. Inside, she sat at her kitchen table cleaning her service pistol, while Kaiser maintained his vigilant watch by the window. The events of the past few days had left them both on edge, sleeping in shifts when they slept at all. A subtle change in Kaiser's posture caught her attention. His ears pricked forward, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Rebecca immediately killed the kitchen lights, moving silently to retrieve her night vision goggles, another piece of equipment Carlos had brought. Through the green-tinted view, she spotted them, dark figures moving through the shadows of her property. She counted 6 men in tactical gear, armed with assault rifles. Her heart pounded, but her hands remained steady as she activated the silent alarm Carlos had installed, sending automatic alerts to both him and local law enforcement. Kaiser's growl deepened as 2 men approached the back door, while others took positions around the house. Rebecca moved to her predetermined defensive position behind an overturned steel table, her pistol ready. She had prepared for this, converting her home into a fortress over the past week. The first explosion shattered her kitchen window, sending glass flying as a smoke grenade rolled across the floor. But Rebecca was ready, already wearing her gas mask. Kaiser, trained for such situations during her military service, stayed low and calm. "Clear the house!" a muffled voice commanded from outside. "Find the woman and the dog!" The back door burst open, and two figures rushed in. Kaiser's reaction was immediate and fierce. He launched himself at the first intruder, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's weapon arm. The attacker screamed, his rifle clattering to the floor. Rebecca took advantage of the chaos, firing two precise shots that caught the second man in the chest of his bulletproof vest, knocking him backward. The impact wouldn't kill him, but it would certainly leave bruises to help identify him later. More men poured in through different entrances. Rebecca maintained her position, using her furniture barricades for cover as she exchanged fire with the attackers. Kaiser moved like a shadow through the smoke, his training evident in every calculated attack. He never stayed still enough to become a target, yet managed to hamper the intruder's movements significantly. As she watched Kaiser's strategic movements, something clicked in Rebecca's mind. His behavior wasn't just protective, it was personal. The way he positioned himself, the specific targets he chose, his absolute focus. This wasn't just trained behavior. Kaiser had done this before. "He was there," she whispered behind her mask, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Kaiser was there the night Maria died. The dog's desperate journey through the desert, his immediate bond with Thomas, his intense reaction to the Brennan family. It all made sense. Kaiser hadn't just randomly found Thomas in the desert. He had been protecting Maria's child from the very beginning, following some invisible trail to bring the baby to safety. A bullet whizzed past her head, snapping her attention back to the immediate threat. She heard sirens in the distance, but the attackers showed no signs of retreating. If anything, they became more desperate. "Grab her!" one shouted. "We need to finish this now!" Two men rushed her position simultaneously. Rebecca managed to shoot one in the leg, but the other reached her barricade. As he vaulted over the table, Kaiser seemed to materialize from the smoke. The shepherd slammed into the attacker with devastating force, driving him to the ground. Rebecca rolled away, coming up in a shooting stance as more attackers approached. But suddenly, bright lights flooded the ranch from outside. "This is the police!" a voice boomed through a megaphone. "The property is surrounded! Drop your weapons!" The change in the attackers was instant. They scattered like cockroaches, abandoning their injured companions in their desperation to escape. Through her night vision goggles, Rebecca watched several figures sprint towards the desert, while others tried to reach their vehicles. Carlos's voice cut through the chaos. "Rebecca, are you okay? In here!" she called back, finally pulling off her gas mask. "We're okay." Kaiser returned to her side, his muzzle dirty but otherwise unharmed. She hugged him tightly, her mind racing with the implications of her revelation about his connection to Maria's murder. Law enforcement swarmed the property, securing the scene and the two injured attackers. Carlos found Rebecca in her kitchen, surveying the damage. "You held them off?" he said, impressed. "And we got two of them. With Patricia's story breaking tomorrow and these guys in custody..." "It's not enough," Rebecca interrupted, her voice firm. "Kaiser was there the night Maria died. He witnessed everything. That's why he's so protective of Thomas, why he led me to him in the desert. He's not just a guard dog, he's a witness." Carlos's eyes widened as he processed this information. "The dog hair found at the scene, we thought it was from the family's dogs, but it was Kaiser's," Rebecca finished. "He must have tried to protect Maria, then somehow tracked Thomas when they took him to the desert. We've been playing defense, Carlos, letting the Brennans set the terms. That ends now." She knelt beside Kaiser, looking into his intelligent eyes. "You've been trying to tell us all along, haven't you, boy? You know where the evidence is." Kaiser's tail wagged once, his attention completely focused on her. "What are you thinking?" Carlos asked. Rebecca stood, her expression determined. "The Brennans sent professionals to kill me tonight. They're desperate, which means we're close to something they don't want us to find. I think it's time we let Kaiser lead us to it." She watched as police photographers documented the scene, evidence technicians collected shell casings, and paramedics treated the injured attackers. The Brennans had tried to silence her permanently tonight, but instead they'd given her exactly what she needed: proof of their desperation and a revelation about Kaiser's crucial role in unraveling their conspiracy. "First thing tomorrow," she told Carlos, "we're going to retrace Kaiser's steps from the night Maria died. The Brennans think they've destroyed all the evidence, but they never considered that their best witness might have 4 legs and a tail." The first rays of dawn crept over the Nevada mountains as Rebecca sat on her front porch, watching police technicians document the aftermath of the night's violence. Kaiser lay at her feet, his head resting on her boots, both of them exhausted but unable to rest. The morning light revealed the full extent of the damage: shattered windows, bullet holes in walls, and shell casings scattered across her floor like deadly confetti. Carlos approached, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed one to Rebecca and settled into the chair beside her. "The forensics team found something interesting," he said. "They pulled some papers from one of the attackers' pockets. Looks like they had orders to eliminate both you and Kaiser specifically." Rebecca's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Why would professional mercenaries have explicit orders about a dog? "That's what got me thinking," Carlos continued. "I've been going through Maria's personal effects, things the police collected after her disappearance. There was a photo I think you should see." He pulled out his phone and showed Rebecca a picture. Her breath caught in her throat. There was Maria Santos, beautiful and alive, sitting on a garden bench at what must have been the Brennan estate. And beside her, younger but unmistakable, sat Kaiser. "That's impossible," Rebecca whispered. But even as she spoke, the pieces started falling into place. Kaiser's head lifted at the sound of Maria's name, his ears perking forward. Kaiser was Maria's dog, Carlos explained, his voice thick with emotion. She'd had him for years. The police assumed he ran away after she disappeared, maybe got lost in the desert. But he didn't get lost, did he? Rebecca set her coffee down and knelt beside Kaiser, really looking at him now. All those times he'd growled at the Brennans, his desperate race into the desert to find Thomas, his unwavering protection of the baby. It hadn't been random. It had been purpose. It had been loyalty. He was there the night they killed her, Rebecca said softly, running her hands through Kaiser's fur. That's why the Brennans were so afraid of him during their visit. They recognized him, and they knew he'd witnessed everything. Kaiser whined softly, pressing his head against her hand. In his aging eyes, Rebecca saw a depth of understanding that took her breath away. He'd been carrying this burden all along, the memory of his beloved owner's murder, the desperate need to protect what remained of her. But how did he find Thomas? She wondered aloud. How did he know where to lead me? Carlos leaned forward. Dogs can track scents for miles, especially if they're motivated. The baby would have carried Maria's scent. Kaiser must have picked up the trail when they took Thomas to the desert. And he knew he needed help. Rebecca realized. He chose my ranch because he could sense I would help, that I could be trusted. All those months of him showing up, hanging around, he was evaluating me. She thought about that first morning, how Kaiser had vanished without a trace, leading her on that desperate chase into the desert. It hadn't been a random occurrence or simple animal instinct. It had been a deliberate action by a devoted protector who needed an ally. Maria used to say Kaiser was the smartest dog she'd ever known, Carlos said, his voice catching. She said he could understand everything, that he knew things before they happened. I thought she was just being a proud dog owner, but now… Rebecca stood up, energy coursing through her despite her exhaustion. The Brennans must have thought they'd covered every trace of Maria's marriage to William, destroyed all the evidence, but they never considered that their most dangerous witness wasn't human. Kaiser rose to his feet, suddenly alert. His entire demeanor changed, as if he sensed the shift in understanding and purpose. "Think about it," Rebecca continued, pacing the porch. "Kaiser was there the night Maria died. He probably tried to protect her, fought back against her attackers. That's why they specifically wanted him eliminated tonight. He's not just a threat because he led me to Thomas. He knows where everything happened. He might even know where they hid evidence." Carlos stood up too, excitement building in his voice. "Maria's body was never found. The police searched the estate, but the Brennans have thousands of acres. They could have hidden everything anywhere." "But Kaiser knows," Rebecca said firmly. "Dogs don't forget. They especially don't forget the scent of someone they loved or the place where they lost them." She knelt again beside Kaiser, taking his face gently between her hands. His intelligent eyes met hers steadily. "You've been trying to tell us all along, haven't you? First, you made sure Thomas was safe. Now you can help us find justice for Maria." Kaiser's tail wagged once, decisively. There was an almost human understanding in his expression, a readiness to act now that someone finally comprehended his purpose. "We need to take him back to the Brennan estate," Carlos said. "Let him show us what he knows." Rebecca nodded, her exhaustion forgotten in the wake of this revelation. Everything about the past few weeks suddenly made sense. Kaiser's protective behavior, his immediate bond with Thomas, his aggressive reactions to the Brennans. He wasn't just a random dog who'd found a baby in the desert. He was Maria's loyal guardian, still fighting to protect her child and bring her killers to justice. The Brennans thought they could erase Maria from existence, Rebecca said, standing up. They thought money and power could cover up any crime, but they didn't count on the loyalty of a dog who loved her. Kaiser moved to stand beside her, his posture straight and proud despite his age. In that moment, Rebecca saw him not just as the aging shepherd who'd wandered onto her ranch, but as Maria's faithful protector, a silent witness who'd been carrying the truth all along, waiting for someone to understand. "We'll need to move fast," Carlos said. "After tonight's attack, the Brennans will know we're close to something." Rebecca looked down at Kaiser, seeing the determination in his stance. "They won't expect us to have figured this out. They're looking for physical evidence, documents, photographs. They never imagined their biggest threat would come from a dog's unfailing memory and unshakable loyalty." Rebecca and Carlos sat in the stark, fluorescent light of the local bank's private consultation room, surrounded by stacks of paperwork from Maria's safety deposit box. The bank manager had been reluctant to grant them access, but Carlos's documentation as Maria's next of kin had finally convinced him. "I can't believe she was this thorough," Carlos said, carefully examining another legal document. His hands trembled slightly as he held his sister's marriage certificate. The paper was crisp and official, bearing both William Brennan's distinctive signature and Maria's flowing script. Rebecca spread more papers across the table. "Maria knew exactly what she was doing. Look at this. Dated photographs of her and William together, their marriage license, even medical records confirming her pregnancy. She made copies of everything." Among the documents lay a handwritten letter from William Brennan himself, expressing his love for Maria and his intention to change his will to include both her and their unborn child. The letter was dated just 3 days before his suspicious death. "She must have known they were in danger," Carlos said softly, touching the corner of his sister's signature. "That's why she prepared all of this, why she kept it hidden away from the estate." Rebecca nodded, carefully organizing the documents into clear evidence groups. Maria was protecting Thomas even then. She knew the family would try to erase any trace of her marriage to William. These papers prove everything: the marriage, Thomas's legitimacy, his right to inherit. Patricia Reed burst into the consultation room, her investigative journalist's instincts clearly fired up by their discovery. "This is exactly what we needed," she said, pulling out her laptop. "With these documents, we can prove the Brennans' conspiracy beyond any doubt. They killed William to prevent him from changing his will, then eliminated Maria to hide the marriage. The three of them worked methodically, scanning every document and creating multiple backup copies." Patricia's fingers flew across her keyboard as she incorporated the new evidence into her exposé. "I've got 3 separate secure servers ready to publish simultaneously," Patricia explained. "Once this goes live, the Brennans won't be able to suppress it. Every major news outlet in the country will have access within minutes." Carlos looked up from the documents, his expression worried. "They'll come after us hard when this breaks. You know that, right? The Brennans won't go down without a fight." Rebecca squared her shoulders, thinking of the baby boy who'd survived against impossible odds. "We're ready for them. I've already contacted Captain Sarah Martinez from my old military unit. She's now with the FBA's Criminal Investigation Division, and she's been building a case against the Brennan family for years." "The FBI?" Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "You've been busy." "Sarah's had suspicions about the Brennans' business dealings for a long time," Rebecca explained. "Fraud, money laundering, suspected murders. But they've always been too powerful to touch. This evidence changes everything. Sarah's got a team standing by, just waiting for our signal." They spent the next hour coordinating their plan. Patricia would release her story across multiple platforms simultaneously, while Carlos submitted the legal documents to the court to establish Thomas's claim. Rebecca's FBI contact would move in with federal agents the moment the story broke, armed with search warrants for the Brennan estate. "What about Thomas's safety?" Carlos asked, voicing the concern that weighed heaviest on all their minds. "The Brennans will be desperate once they realize we have proof. They might try one last time to eliminate him." Rebecca's jaw set firmly. "Thomas is already in protective custody. Sarah arranged it this morning. He's with federal marshals at an undisclosed location. Kaiser's with him." She smiled slightly. "I insisted they stay together. That dog saved his life twice now. I'm not separating them." Patricia closed her laptop with a decisive click. "Everything's ready. I've got the story formatted and loaded. We can go live whenever you give the word." Rebecca looked at her watch, then at her companions. The weight of what they were about to do settled over the room. They were preparing to bring down one of the most powerful families in Nevada, expose multiple murders, and change the lives of countless people forever. "We need to coordinate the timing perfectly," Rebecca said. "Patricia's story needs to hit the media at exactly 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's when Carlos will file the court documents, and Sarah's team will move in with their warrants. We have to hit them from all sides at once, give them no time to react or destroy evidence." Carlos gathered up the original documents, carefully placing them in a secure briefcase. "I'll have my legal team working through the night to prepare the filings. Everything will be ready." Patricia began packing up her equipment. "I've got a secure location set up to monitor the story's release. Once it breaks, it'll spread faster than the Brennans can contain it." Rebecca stood, feeling the familiar tension of pre-mission preparation, just like her military days. "Get some rest tonight," she advised. "Tomorrow we take down an empire built on murder and lies, and we make sure Thomas gets everything his parents wanted for him." They left the bank separately, each heading to their designated safe locations to prepare for the morning's coordinated strike against the Brennan family. The evidence was secure, the plan was set, and justice for Maria and William was finally within reach. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Patricia Reed's exposé hit every major news network simultaneously. The headline blazed across screens nationwide: "Murder, Greed, and a Hero Dog. The shocking truth behind the Brennan family fortune." Rebecca watched from a secure location, as the story exploded across social media platforms. Within minutes, Dankbrennen crimes and Haag justice for Maria were trending. The article detailed William and Maria's secret marriage, supported by scanned copies of their marriage certificate and William's handwritten love letters. Patricia's masterful storytelling painted a vivid picture of their romance, making it impossible for readers not to be moved by their tragic end. But it was Kaiser's role that truly captured the nation's heart. Photos of the aging German Shepherd alongside baby Thomas flooded the internet. The story of how he had protected his murdered owner's child, leading Rebecca to the abandoned infant in the desert, resonated deeply with people. News anchors could barely hold back tears as they reported how Kaiser had used his own body to shield the baby from the scorching sun. The loyalty of this remarkable dog stands in stark contrast to the betrayal of the Brennan family. One commentator declared, her voice trembling with emotion, "While they plotted murder for money, Kaiser never forgot his duty to protect." The public's response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with demands for justice. People shared their own stories of family betrayal and corporate greed, but Kaiser's unwavering loyalty became a symbol of hope that touched everyone who heard the story. "Look at this," Carlos said, showing Rebecca his phone. The hashtag # Kaiser the Hero had over 1 million mentions in just 2 hours. People are calling him America's most faithful dog. Rebecca watched as more details emerged throughout the morning. Patricia's article methodically laid out the evidence of the Brennan family's crimes. William's murder disguised as a heart attack, Maria's disappearance and likely murder, and the cold-blooded attempt to kill an innocent baby for inheritance money. The story hit harder because of its human elements. Patricia had included Maria's background as a hard-working immigrant who had won the heart of a wealthy rancher. She detailed William's secret plans to change his will, thwarted by his own murder. The public was particularly outraged by the attempted infanticide of baby Thomas, abandoned in the desert to die. "The Brennans can't buy their way out of this one," Patricia said during a secure video call with Rebecca. "Every attempt they make to suppress the story just makes it spread faster. People are too invested now." By noon, the pressure had become too intense for law enforcement to ignore. Rebecca received a call from her FBI contact, Captain Sarah Martinez. "We're moving in now," Sarah reported. "The public outrage gave us the political cover we needed. No one can accuse us of targeting a respected family anymore, not with millions of people demanding action." Television news showed live helicopter footage of FBI agents raiding the Brennan estate. Constance Brennan's arrest became the day's most viral image, the family matriarch being led out in handcuffs, her usual aristocratic composure shattered by rage and fear. But the publicity also brought increased danger. Rebecca's secure phone buzzed with an urgent warning from Sarah. "We've intercepted chatter about a potential hit team," Sarah said tersely. "The Brennans still have loyal mercenaries who haven't been rounded up. They're desperate enough to try one last attack, even with all this attention." Rebecca glanced at the television, where news channels were now showing her own photo alongside Thomas's story. Her military training kicked in as she assessed their vulnerability. The public spotlight made them easier targets, even as it forced official action against the Brennans. "Security teams are en route to reinforce all safe house locations," Sarah continued. "But stay alert. These people have nothing left to lose." Throughout the afternoon, the story continued to build. Legal experts appeared on news shows explaining how the evidence proved Thomas's legitimate claim to the Brennan fortune. Financial reporters calculated the inheritance at over $500 million. Social media couldn't get enough of Kaiser, with users creating artwork and tributes to the loyal shepherd who had saved a baby and exposed a conspiracy. "The public pressure is crushing them," Carlos reported after speaking with his legal team. "The Brennan lawyers are already reaching out about a possible settlement. They know they can't fight this in court with the whole country watching." Rebecca nodded, but kept her guard up. Experience had taught her that wounded predators were the most dangerous. The Brennans' public destruction might make them more desperate to eliminate the witnesses who had exposed them. She watched another news segment about Kaiser, showing him protecting Thomas at the ranch. The German Shepherd's fierce loyalty had not only saved a child's life, but had brought down a corrupt empire. Now that same publicity might help protect them. The Brennans wouldn't dare harm America's newest canine hero without facing even greater public wrath. But Rebecca knew the final chapter of this story wasn't written yet. Somewhere out there, the last of the Brennans' mercenaries were plotting one final desperate attack. The desert night wrapped around Rebecca's ranch like a dark blanket, broken only by the soft glow of security lights. Inside, Rebecca cradled Thomas while Kaiser kept watch at the window, his ears pricked forward at every sound. The German Shepherd's behavior had grown increasingly agitated over the past hour, and Rebecca had learned to trust his instincts. A flash of headlights swept across the walls, not the expected police patrol, too many vehicles approaching fast. Kaiser's low growl confirmed her suspicions. Rebecca quickly moved to the secure room she'd prepared, placing Thomas in the reinforced crib before checking her satellite phone. No signal. "They've jammed communications," she muttered, grabbing her gun from the safe. Years of military training kicked in as she heard vehicles screeching to a halt outside. Floodlights suddenly blazed through every window. A familiar voice cut through a megaphone. "Doctor! Hartwell! Come out now, or we're coming in!" Constance Brennan's voice held none of its usual aristocratic control. Instead, it trembled with desperate rage. Rebecca peered through the security camera feed. Constance stood surrounded by at least 8 armed men, all carrying military-grade weapons. The family matriarch herself held a handgun, her perfectly manicured finger already on the trigger. "You have 1 minute to bring me every piece of evidence, and that brat," Constance shouted. "Retract the story, or everyone dies tonight." Kaiser's growl deepened as Rebecca assessed their options. The police were due for a check-in soon, but with the communications jammed, they had no way to call for immediate help. She had to protect Thomas, and buy time. "Mrs. Brennan?" Rebecca called out, keeping her voice steady. "The evidence is already public. Killing us won't change that." "Public opinion can be managed," Constance snarled. "Dead witnesses and a grieving adoptive mother who retracts her lies. That's all I need. 30 seconds, Doctor." Rebecca watched one of the gunmen move toward the back door. Kaiser's muscles tensed, ready to spring. She placed her hand on his fur, feeling his trembling energy. "Last chance!" Constance screamed, her composure completely shattered. "Bring me the baby now!" The first explosion rocked the front door, and chaos erupted. 2 gunmen burst through the splintered entrance while others smashed windows. Kaiser launched himself at the nearest intruder, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's arm. The attacker's scream mixed with gunfire as Rebecca took cover, returning shots with practiced precision. Through the security feed, she saw Constance pushing towards the house, her face twisted with murderous intent. "Find the brat!" the matriarch shrieked. "Kill anyone in your way!" Kaiser moved like a grey shadow through the firefight, taking down another gunman trying to reach the secure room. Rebecca managed to drop 2 more attackers, but she could hear others moving through the house. They were being pushed back toward Thomas. Suddenly, distant sirens pierced the night. Carlos must have noticed the jammed communications and alerted the authorities, but Constance showed no sign of retreat. "Bring me that baby!" she screamed, storming toward the secure room with wild eyes. Everything happened in a blur of motion. Constance burst through the door, raising her gun toward the crib where Thomas lay crying. Rebecca lunged forward, but she knew she wouldn't reach them in time. Then Kaiser's massive form soared through the air, intercepting Constance's aim. The gun went off. Kaiser yelped as the bullet tore into his shoulder, but his momentum carried him into Constance, sending them both crashing to the floor. The matriarch's head struck the corner of a table, and she lay still. Police cruisers screeched to a halt outside, and Carlos's voice boomed through a megaphone. "FBI, drop your weapons!" The remaining gunmen, hearing their employer's silence, quickly surrendered. But Rebecca paid no attention to the chaos around her. She knelt beside Kaiser, who lay breathing heavily, blood seeping from his wound. Despite his pain, the shepherd's eyes remained fixed on Thomas, still guarding him. "Stay with me, boy," Rebecca whispered, applying pressure to the wound as Carlos and the police secured the scene. "You saved him again. You saved all of us." Thomas's cries turned to whimpers as he reached toward his protector. Kaiser's tail thumped weakly against the floor, and he managed to lift his head enough to give the baby's hand a gentle lick. Carlos burst in, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "Medics are right behind me," he said, helping Rebecca with Kaiser. "Constance is alive but unconscious. The rest are in custody." Rebecca nodded, her hands still pressed against Kaiser's fur. "He took the bullet meant for Thomas," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He wouldn't let them hurt Maria's baby. Not ever." Kaiser's breathing grew more labored, but his eyes never left Thomas. Even now, wounded and weakening, the shepherd's loyalty never wavered. He had fulfilled his promise to Maria, protecting her son until the very end. Emergency responders rushed in, immediately starting work on Kaiser's wound. The shepherd finally allowed his eyes to close as the medics took over, secure in the knowledge that his charge was safe at last. Kaiser's recovery took several weeks, but each day brought visible improvement. The German shepherd's determination matched his loyalty, and soon he was back on his feet, though moving a bit slower than before. The bullet wound had left a scar beneath his fur, but his spirit remained undiminished as he continued his vigilant watch over baby Thomas. In the courthouse, Rebecca sat with Carlos as the judge delivered the verdicts. Constance Brennan and her co-conspirators faced multiple life sentences for Maria's murder and the attempted murder of Thomas. The matriarch's perfectly composed mask finally cracked as she was led away in handcuffs, her empire of corruption crumbling around her. "For Maria," Carlos whispered, tears in his eyes as justice was finally served for his sister. Rebecca squeezed his hand, knowing that while nothing could bring Maria back, her son would now be safe, and her killers would pay for their crimes. The inheritance proceedings moved swiftly once Thomas's legitimacy was proven through the marriage documents and DNA testing. As William Brennan's only heir, the baby boy became the sole inheritor of the vast Brennan fortune and all its holdings. The judge granted Rebecca permanent guardianship, ensuring she could raise Thomas as her own son while protecting his interests. "It's a huge responsibility," Rebecca said one evening, sitting on a rancher's porch with Carlos as they watched Thomas play on a blanket under Kaiser's watchful eye. "Managing all this for him." Carlos smiled, his warm eyes reflecting the sunset. "That's why you're not doing it alone. We're family now, all of us." He gestured to Kaiser, who had positioned himself between Thomas and a curious rabbit that had ventured too close to the blanket. The Brennan estate required careful management to transform it from a tool of corruption into a force for good. Carlos's background in law enforcement proved invaluable as they restructured the family's holdings, ensuring everything would be properly managed for Thomas's future. Kaiser's protective instincts never wavered, even as Thomas grew from infant to toddler. The shepherd seemed to understand that his duty to Maria now extended to her son, a sacred trust he had earned the right to keep. Each night he slept outside Thomas's room, a gray guardian angel with battle scars and unwavering devotion. Rebecca marveled at how life had changed so dramatically since that scorching day when Kaiser had led her into the desert. What began as a desperate rescue had transformed into something beautiful, a family forged in crisis and bound together by love. One peaceful evening, as Thomas drifted off to sleep with Kaiser dozing nearby, Rebecca stood in the doorway, watching them. Carlos joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Maria would be happy," he said softly. "Her son is safe, loved, and surrounded by protectors who would do anything for him." Rebecca nodded, thinking of how a loyal dog's determination had brought them all together, creating something precious from tragedy. Kaiser lifted his head sleepily, checking on his charge before settling back down with a contented sigh. They had all found their place, Rebecca as a mother, Carlos as a devoted uncle, Kaiser as an eternal guardian, and Thomas as the beloved child who had brought them together. The vast Brennan fortune would now serve a greater purpose, managed by people who understood the true meaning of family and loyalty. Justice had been served, healing had begun, and love had transformed strangers into something more precious than mere wealth could ever buy. A real family, bound not by blood, but by choice, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.